Well, I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher. I'm the CEO of the Home Furnishings Association, and this is one of our weekly webinars. And this go around, it's going to be focusing on delivery. Never has that been more important a piece of the entire sales process than it is right now, particularly after all of the confines of the pandemic. So we're going to get into this in just a moment, but let me do a little bit of housekeeping real quick. Want to mention to you that on the right side of your screen, you'll see that there is the ability to send us a question. Do it. We'll do our best to get to it during this broadcast. We hope that you do that. Also, you'll see that there is one downloadable item that you're going to find there, and that is the HFA benefits guide. The insights you're getting here today, just a small piece of what our team can deliver to help you with your business. So please make sure to take advantage of that. And also, when this is done, it's going to be posted on our website, myhfa.org, and there you'll find an entire library of these webinars that have been super valuable always, but particularly in the last year. So let me introduce our panel of guests here. We've got three people to really help us paint this picture today. And I'm going to go in the order that I see people, which may be different from you, but I'm going to do it anyway. John Vargo is the Senior Vice President of Operations for J.B. Hunt. Everybody's heard of J.B. Hunt, and they certainly jumped into the final mile world in a big way over the last 3 years. So he's joining us. John, I thank you for that. Ted Stoker is joining us. He's Vice President of Operations for Kelly's Gift Shop Suppliers. And also Ed Massoud, he's the owner of Home Furnishings in New Jersey. Ed has been in this business a long time and has a great deal of expertise in the logistics areas. So gentlemen, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you all being here. You know, it's interesting. If I can put us in the Wayback Machine for a second. Before the pandemic hit, we had heard consistently for a long, long time about the importance of final mile, white glove, all of these things that were such a focus of our home furnishings industry. So then we have this pandemic hit. We have the whole issue of safety and health protocols that now had to be adhered to and still are, and all kinds of changing dynamics there. Then, of course, we have this lovely supply chain interruption that means we're talking about delays. And so we have delivery people that are delivering to people who are probably in many cases really happy to finally get what they're getting, but probably not super happy in the process. So the complexities of this have grown, and that's why we're here today, because we want to really talk about a number of areas, and that is the skill development to turn these delivery drivers truly into ambassadors. We want to talk about some of your insights on hiring and training, problem solving, you name it. So we've got a lot to talk about. I just want to jump in first. I always like to kind of do a scene setting question. So John, let me ask you first. Right now, biggest challenge for those delivery teams that are now walking up and knocking on that door to make that delivery right at this moment today, not so much historically over the last year, but right now, what are the biggest stumbling blocks they're facing?
Well, I think you already kind of hit on it, the fact that the consumer has been waiting for months at a time for their product, and just making sure that they meet those expectations, all while following guidelines due to the pandemic. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is knock on the door, knowing that they may already have a disappointed consumer, and making sure that they can wow them throughout that process.
Okay, so they may already have one strike against them before the other person opens the door. Ed, let me ask you, what have you seen right now as that real struggle for those that are making those deliveries?
Well, like John just mentioned, you have the consumer has their level of expectation, and when we're knocking on that door, that delivery team doesn't know really what he's walking into. So the training, the calming that we see has been just vital to making a successful delivery.
Okay, and Ted, I'll let you kind of weigh in here on this little kind of starter question as well. Kind of play off of those last two. Are you also experiencing a lot of that, or are there some other things you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add that we're experiencing the same thing as John and Ed mentioned, is how to deal with the consumer who's already in an agitated state in many cases. But to me, the biggest struggle right now is finding good quality ambassadors. And that's the struggle, because the employment environment right now is not good in terms of finding good quality delivery drivers. And that's our biggest challenge right now, because you can find people, but are they the right people for what you want to do?
Okay, let's dig into that, because this is something, you know, I'm really fortunate. I get to talk to retailers on a daily basis, and what you just said is exactly one of the huge areas is finding people, first of all. So okay, we have a limited pool, let's say, but we want to make sure, however, that it's not just the warm body syndrome, right? So Ed, let me have this one kicked to you. So right now, what are those key attributes you're looking for? You know, those you know, and again, it's so funny here that we're not even talking about physical part of this thing. We're not talking about, you know, these teams are having to do heavy lifting of a different kind now. But Ed, what are we talking about here? What are the attributes that, as you're looking for these delivery folks, what should they have, and are you willing to look, you know, to kind of settle, or should you not at this point? Give me an idea.
No, you can never settle when it comes to a delivery team. You're walking in, you know, we're being invited into somebody's home. That is probably an honor when you really think about it. So to settle, you only expose yourself to all kinds of possibilities, which we don't want to even think about.
Okay, so in other words, it's the point where you can really mess. I mean, you can have the greatest sales process ever and get to the end. You stumble at the end, and you've poisoned the whole mix.
No question about it. And really, when you look at the team, you know, what are the attributes of a team? What makes that perfect delivery team? You know, first of all, there's nothing easy about delivering furniture. Nothing. It is probably the toughest delivery you'll ever make. So the fact that because of the weight, because of where it's being delivered inside the home, then on top of it, you have that going into a home, you have to be careful of the surroundings and damaging the property within a home. So the first and major attribute for a delivery standpoint is really the communications. When you knock on that door, you ring that doorbell, it's how you present yourself. And that's going to give our customers a comfort level at that point. So great communication skills, and then having the team that has the brawn, the muscle, that knows how to successfully handle and maneuver furniture into the home. And that comes from pure, unadulterated training.
So Ted, how do you then find some? You talked about this being the problem. So knowing that, how do you find good quality people at this point that can do that job? Because that's a huge concern for our retailers.
It starts with the interview process, of course, and you have to set expectations for who's ever doing the hiring, whether it's HR or the operations manager, whomever. But set the expectations. These are the minimum expectations we'll accept. And if the person doesn't, if the candidate doesn't wow you as an interviewer with their personality and their positive attitude and their physical appearance, quite frankly, then how's that going to look to the consumer? So the first screen is, does the candidate present themselves well? So in a variety of training that we've done, we train our drivers that they have to be clean cut, they have to look presentable. Otherwise, that's going to be our consumers are not going to, or they're going to be on guard, if you will, to allow them into the house. So that's the first step, the physical appearance. And the second step is, are they positive in how they discuss things with you? So if they're upbeat and positive and cooperative, or are they argumentative even during an interview, which surprisingly some are in fact, you know, argumentative during an interview. But that's what you're looking for, that positive attitude. The actual physical delivery, you can train that, but you can't train a personality. You can't train an attitude.
That just seems like such a switch. John, am I right in saying that I mean, look, you've always wanted nice people doing this job, but what Ted just described, is that not just an absolute inversion of the way it used to be? That, well, I can train them to be, you know, the customer service side, but I got to make sure they can physically do it. And he's basically saying, if they don't have those good skills, interpersonal skills off the bat, then you're in trouble. Is that truly been a major change?
I think that, there is a change in that. I do think that, you know, just to add kind of to Ed's comments too, I do think, you know, obviously empathy and being patient are important too. You know, and I do think you can teach someone to be empathetic and be an effective listener to the customer. You know, but having a positive mindset and having a positive communication, that is something that you want to look for in a skill set. And
but if I'm hiring, but if and Ted, you tell me if I'm on the right track here. It sounds to me like you're saying you better approach the interview process like a customer. Because the stuff you're talking about you need to look at this person as like, okay, is that person representing my company coming to that door? So I need to do it from that way. And John, to your point, what I'm kind of hearing here though is that you want to make sure that, okay, while that may not be, you know, perhaps, yes, you can train some of these communication skills, but first impression, is that maybe the most important hireability factor right now, that if they don't have that, you don't want them to inadvertently be shutting somebody down? I mean, John, give me an idea. If I didn't want to misstate that for you, but that's kind of what I'm hearing you guys say.
no, absolutely.
Yeah, the presentation, how he presents himself in his demeanor and his look has to be one that is opens up to a customer. Because again, they're going into someone's bedroom. There's not, you know, when you really think about going into the most precious room in the home, it's their bedroom that they're possibly making that delivery. So you know, yes, we've seen Braun turn where they can learn how to be polite, respectful, and communicate well to a customer. But I think attitude, listen, without attitude, without a good attitude, you don't have to worry about Braun. You don't have to worry about knocking on a door. People are not going to let you in, and they're not going to last long. Attitude
and again, I just want to really hit hard on this fact, and I know that you guys know this, but it's worth reminding people again and again and again, is that this is the critical final piece. And if you screw it up at the end, it you know, that's the lasting impression. And I think we've all been there when we've had a really great delivery experience. I mean, that just is like the cherry on the cake. You know, it's just super important. So are there places, Ted, let me kick it back to you. Are there places or avenues for finding people that you've had better luck than others? Is it just general postings, or, you know, because really what the people that tune into this call want to know is, where are the places you're finding the people, as well as what you're looking for? What have you had luck in as far as sources of finding people?
So that's really the crystal ball, right? That's how do you find the right people? And there's not a magic bullet on that one at all. It's the normal sources of recruiting, but it's just going through a number of candidates till you find the right one. We actually role play. We sit down with a candidate and role play with them. Okay, pretend I'm the customer and I'm going to ask some questions and see how they react to those kind of things. If it's an experienced driver, an experienced delivery person, it's a shorter process. But if it's someone who hasn't been a delivery person yet in their career, but you think have the tools, the personality and the other things that you want, then by all means, that person is worth developing.
John, you guys obviously, you know, JB Hunt, you're one of the you know, the largest players. Where are you guys finding the best sources for the talent that you're hiring?
Yeah, first, Mark, I'd say the primary thing though is to make sure you retain the delivery teams that you do have, especially your high quality teams. With the demand, there's significant demand in the marketplace for delivery teams coming out of the pandemic. So that's the primary. But, you know, we really try to make sure we have a career path for our folks, you know, looking for individuals that are inside whether it's in the warehouse, that are working that way, have the right skills and attributes, but want a career path. We'll look to help and invest in developing them and training them and promoting those into those roles. And so we try to really build a career for someone. That's what we believe is important. And really you create a raving fan by doing that.
I love that, because that was something I was going to just ask as a follow-up, because you know, you're absolutely right. In any job, it's always much cheaper to retain somebody than it is to bring new people on. But you know, to your point, you want to, I guess, show that it's not just a job. Is that, Ted, would you agree with that from the standpoint that if you want to have that stickiness, if you want somebody to invest in themselves, they got to see there's something beyond that? So are you finding that that's critically important, that they understand that there's something else that they can work toward?
Absolutely. That not everyone wants to progress. Some people are just comfortable in whatever zone they're in at the moment or position they're in, but the opportunity is out there for those that want it. And by all means, retaining your employees is by far the best way to go. But as you grow, as a growing company or turnover happens, which happens in life, you have to go to the outside at some point and try and recruit some outside people, because you can't give up all of your good talent internally to turn into drivers, of course. But there's always a combination of the external recruits and the internal recruits as well.
And you know, one of the sticking points for a lot of people beyond the career piece of it is benefits. Ed, are you having to pay more, offer more? What's that marketplace like right now for those applicants?
Well, in all positions now, we're all paying premiums, because trying to get people in any position, let alone in a position that like a delivery driver or a handler that's going on the truck, we are paying premiums, and quite honestly, they deserve it for the work that they are doing. One of the things that I just want to circle back on, we've had a significant amount of success with taking internals, warehouse people, because we have to assemble goods within our buildings. So today, most manufacturers ship in a KD format where chairs need to be assembled or occasional pieces need to be assembled. So where we've had success, we can hire drivers that may not necessarily be skilled at the home delivery or handling home furniture. But our delivery team is made up of a driver, obviously, and their helper or assistants that are very proficient in assembly, handling of furniture. So we actually marry a team together. So we may hire a driver from the outside and then use internal people that we give them a career path, that we teach them and we work with them. We see their attitudes, and they make a really good delivery team. They're actually teaching the driver, and the driver's getting more proficient at what they're doing.
So the lead person in your delivery, when it comes to that customer, is not necessarily the person holding the CDL.
No.
Okay, so that's interesting. So there's a great takeaway, that you have somebody internally that understands your culture and what you're looking for, and you kind of pair them together. I want to remind people that have just tuned in, by the way, that we're talking about the real importance of your delivery teams these days, and how to really make sure they're an ambassador for your company, so that they are truly the exclamation point at the end of the sentence that's all about the sale. And we're going to be talking a lot about these different areas, but I want to kind of sort of tick them off one by one. And we're joined, by the way, by Ed Massoud, Ted Stoker, and John Vargo. John, let me ask you this. So Ed just started us off into another great point here. So he's got somebody internally that understands their culture, what they want to do outside there. So talk about that training piece. What does that look like? What does it look like for you guys, as far as, okay, we know there's attributes you want to make sure that they've honed, that they're prepared when they get out there. So how do you break that down? What does that look like? What would you suggest is a great way to make sure that you're training your teams well?
Yeah, I think, well, one, you have to invest in training and development, and it goes beyond just onboarding of the delivery teams. You have to have a program that continually trains them on those skills and attributes of clear communication, effective listening. I think it's important, Ted mentioned role playing. I think when you have your employees, that's a critical task that you can really make real world experiences and walk through challenges that they see. You can do daily meetings where you walk through assembly of new product. I don't want to underestimate how important it is that your delivery teams understand the products and goods and services that they're delivering. They need to be experts on that. You have to know more than what the customer knows. Otherwise, that's going to be a disappoint for them. So I think just really focusing on continually, investing in that training and development of your employees is critical.
Okay, Ted, what about y'all?
So a couple of different things, and John's 100% right. Ongoing training is exactly the right thing. Onboarding is important, so the initial 60 days, 30 days, whatever the onboarding process is, but even a senior driver, a senior delivery person needs continual onboarding and training, because the job changes. The COVID changed things in our world, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a different approach to people now in the COVID world than there was pre-COVID. There's always change. So ongoing training is extremely important. And previous life, I developed a number of training programs, online training programs, both in person as well as online for our delivery drivers. And most of them found them very effective, very helpful, and we're appreciative. They're actually very appreciative that we're investing in them to help their skills so that they provide, because they want to provide a good service. They want to do a good job. There's no question about it. So they appreciate the investment in them to make a better delivery to the customer.
And let's just stick with that for a second. What have been some of those key things? You talked about the modules you created. So what are those skills? I mean, beyond just saying they need to communicate well and that sort of thing like this, what are those things that each of the three of you are looking for that you feel make a truly effective member of a delivery team? And Ted, I'll start with you, and then we'll work our way around the horn.
So it starts with the greeting of the customer. So we train them on how to properly greet the customer. We also, before that even, we train them on how their appearance should look in terms of the company logo and the company apparel and things like that. And when they're pulling up to a house, how do they park the truck? That's important, that matters. And when they run into a situation where they can't park it exactly where they would like to park it, what do? So you have to run into those role-playing situations. And then the obvious delivery part of it is how to keep the house clean and how to keep the furniture clean, and talking to the customer before you even enter their house to find out what are their expectations, what are their limits inside the house and restrictions. You don't want to assume anything. So they have to tell you, and then you have to follow their guidance in terms of what they want you to do.
And remind them that a lot of times when it's a branded truck, you're driving a billboard for the company that you work for. So anything you do, even how you drive down the street doing to and from the delivery, can be a part of that. Ed, what are those things too that you think are those key elements that are just difference makers right now for those delivery teams?
Well, Ted hit on most of them, and probably 90% of them. I would probably say, just to add to what Ted's comment was, is really even when the job is completed, it's reviewing each piece of furniture in the home, where it's been positioned, and just actually communicating with that customer and showing them each piece that was positioned inside the home and reviewing each item that was delivered. That again, is like you said before, Mark, we have one shot. And this one shot, when you're in someone's home, to really wow them and really them felt that they made the right choice, and they're going to tell 10 people.
And I like that too, when you talk about reviewing it, because I'm assuming here, and John, let me ask you to pick up on this, making certain that they don't leave before everything is where the customer wants it and should be. Is that an important little nugget too? Because it's not just drop and run, but make sure that they don't 10 minutes later go, oh man, I don't have the manpower here just to move that. How much does that play into it as well before they leave?
I think that's very important, and being flexible if it's not in the location that they want, to be open to making a change and adapting to what the consumer wants to make sure that they're satisfied. So I think that's very important.
And I think just based on what John just said, this is a really important point, is when those unusual circumstances come up, the driver has to know that their manager, the guys back at the warehouse, have their back. So if they are going to be delayed, they're not going to get in trouble because they have X amount of deliveries to make. But if they're spending the time wisely, they have to know management has their back to support them.
Well, I wasn't planning to jump into this just this second, but let's do it because you went there. Ted, tell me about how far these crews should be able to go when it comes to problem solving, because a lot of times you talk about a skill that these teams need out there when they're on site. What kind of leeway should a retailer give that crew to really solve those problems out there? When do they get to that point of going too far? But what's that latitude like?
So first, we all have to understand that it's going to happen. It being a problem, it is going to happen. There's no question about it. And not every delivery, but with some frequency, there's going to be a problem with the furniture. There's going to be a problem with the location, a problem with the person, the problem with something. And how you empower your people is very important. You should empower them as much as you possibly can, because the consumer wants that person standing in front of them to solve their problem. They don't want them to have to call somebody. They don't have to go back to the shop or go back to the warehouse. They want that problem solved if it's solvable on site. It's not always. If they unwrap something and it's got a big rip in it, there's not much they can do about that. Well, there is something they can do, but they can't solve the problem immediately for them right at that point. But to the extent that they can solve the problem on site, you want to empower them. And what we do is we encourage our drivers, if there's something that you can't solve for them right now, get on the phone, call back to the manager and talk it over. There may be a solution that the manager can provide to you that the driver's not aware of.
And don't leave yet at that point. Ed, what kind of parameters do you put on your teams when it comes to problem solving? Are there limitations to what they can do and how?
Well, there are limitations. You know, we want them to be, when it comes to movement of goods, when it comes to working with that client, we want them to be able to satisfy the customer, period. Where there's now limitations is if there is a problem from a defect. They're looking at something and there's a damage, or what they perceive as a damage. That's where now automation has helped us tremendously, because now when that driver can get on his pad and immediately start communicating with the service technicians, and they're showing the service techs what the problem is, and there's a dialogue that's going between experts, between people that can see the problem or issue, and now there's a strong effective dialogue that takes place, and the customer is now feeling a bit more ease, because now everybody's aware of what it is and whether it has to be returned or whether it can be repaired in home. The point is there's a resolution.
So this is a huge takeaway. So you're saying that they have the ability to, in real time, right there, bring in somebody else and visually show them. So hopefully that takes care of the problem. But you're saying to that customer, we're on this right now, and you're really making that. I know that's kind of a win to me.
Well, and what we would say to a customer is literally, this issue was going to be, we had a 72-hour timeline. When there was an issue, and it may have been a minor issue, we let the customer know the resolution time as well, because we want them to know, one, we see it, it's recorded, comfort, we know the remedy, and here's the timeline in which it's going to be resolved. And again, automation has been able to do that through technology.
Through use of a pad. So it sounds to me like a great takeaway, at least from your seat today, is that invest in at least that little bit of technology to really connect them. John, do you guys do anything similar with JB Hunt?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. And I think it really helps give the consumer confidence too, that they know that it's being documented, that there's clear, evidence of what their concern is and it's being addressed. And then it really allows both our management staff and our customers to have it immediately and access, just like Ed said, and continue to work on that problem and addressing it for the consumer. So I think technology has been great to be able to help resolve those issues.
Had a question here that we asked for those that sign up for this to bring questions to us, and this one is kind of interesting, and it's a little bit of a spin on what we're just talking about, but I want to bring it up right now. So we know that damage is just the last thing that you want to hear, but we've talked about all these great skills for these people you're trying to hire, and communicating and all that kind of good stuff. But if they don't take care of what they're delivering, and you're getting damaged goods delivered all the time, so how does that play a part in this training and in getting these crews, prepared? We don't want to forget about that primary piece of it. John, I'll start with you on this one. You got to also be mindful of that. So how do you do that with your crews to make sure? Is that something that also needs the refreshers, or what do you guys do?
It does. So it starts on the onboarding process, on proper product handling, making sure they're protecting the furniture with blanket wraps, depending on how it's packaging. But then it has to also be ongoing. And you have to be able to measure it. You have to be able to know down to the delivery team what their performance is and how often what are their damage ratios. And then so that way you can recognize there's an opportunity for improvement for ongoing, but you can't just do it at the onboarding. It has to be continually training, but it's very important to protect the product.
Are there, and Ted, let me ask you this, are there times when packaging just changes enough to where the crews need to be aware of something that's just a new product, a new vendor that's just packaged differently so that they're aware of that? I mean, do you need to keep them in the loop on that? Because look, I'm not just a consumer, but I've had that happen where I've received stuff that's been in packaging that it might as well have been done by somebody at MIT as far as I'm concerned. And I'm tearing things apart to get to it. Do the crews need to be really aware also of changes in that piece of the process?
So one of the biggest complaints that I've seen or heard from my delivery crews is, I didn't know. And you can fill in the blank after that. I didn't know. They were surprised. And that is the worst thing you can put on a delivery crew is that they're surprised by something, whether it be packaging or whether it be an unknown. They were supposed to make a delivery. I didn't know this was going to be on the 4th floor, those kinds of things. So giving them as much information up front. So we actually have, and it's not always possible for everybody to do this, but we have our delivery drivers involved with the loading of their trucks. So some places have warehouse people load the trucks in the delivery sequence. We have our drivers involved in that. So they physically see the product. And if they see something unusual as it's being loaded, they stop and say, hold on a second, something's not right here. I need more information, or that's different than I thought it would be. That way you avoid the surprise at the consumer's location, and you put that surprise back in your warehouse, which is where you can do something about it.
Right, and do something about it without doing it in front of the customer. That's yet another wonderful takeaway. Appreciate that. I want to remind people that you're joining us for the HFA webinar, and being joined by, that's Ted Stoker you just heard from. He's Vice President of Operations for Kelly's Gift Shop Suppliers. We've got Ed Massoud from Home Furnishings of New Jersey, and we have John Vargo, who's a VP with JB Hunt. So we have this desire for them to be able to problem solve, out on the spot. Now that's great if it's something wrong with the furniture, but we're in a hyper anxiety time in our world and in our country based on COVID. And we're sending these delivery crews sometimes into a hot mess where a customer is ticked off and they're almost laying for a fight. And you've got to protect your crews, how they feel about themselves. Ed, how do you prepare these crews beyond these other skills we've talked about just to handle that potential blow up that might happen in front of them? And maybe the biggest issue that these delivery folks have to deal with.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, being from New York and New Jersey, every day you're walking into.
Forget about it.
It's real every day. And so part of it is, yes, people today have been waiting longer. Their anxiety levels are higher. So it may be more spread throughout the country. But for the most part, people are excited when they're getting their delivery. They have been looking forward to this. It all starts again by that knock on the door and the greet that Ted was talking about. Hi, I'm here from Home Furnishings in New Jersey. We are here to deliver your bedroom set. And you're going to walk them, and they're going to walk you to their bed and to their room, and you're going to start discussing with the where the anxiety will take place. Where the anxiety heightens is if there is something wrong with something now they've been waiting for a longer period of time. So key, let's do it right. Let's make sure we practice all the protocols from grade inspection after manufacturing or build out, to the wrapping, to the stacking or the packing of the truck, to the actual then delivery and how we present it. And even trying to do everything perfect, there is going to be that time where we all know something's going to happen. So it's really about professionalism, keeping your cool, and always knowing the magic rule: the customer's always right. And as long as you know that rule, and that delivery team understands that their role is to keep that customer smiling from end to end.
Well, and you've hit on something though that's really important for especially the people tuning into this webinar that run businesses and that are the ones sending this stuff out is don't hang your people out to dry. Make sure that you're not putting them in a situation. And John, that's easier said than done. How do you make sure that those crews feel supported so that you're not poisoning the mix already for them as they knock on that door?
Yeah, it starts with setting them up for success. That's making sure that throughout the sales process that you're making sure that you're delivering upon the products and services that they expect, but then doing a pre-call with the consumer, let them know what to expect when the delivery team arrives. What are the COVID precautionaries that they're going to be taking place. Then also what they expect, that they'll do a walkthrough with them, that they're going to walk through the home, place the product in place. So I think that helps set them up for success. I also think it's important, you want to make sure that you're efficient and that your teams are productive, but don't overroute them or give them, something that if they do run into an issue, that they don't have time to recover. And so I think that's important. And then, always support them. If they run into an event that they can't de-escalate, even though you're empowering them to, be available for them and be there immediately to de-escalate the situation. So I think that's important.
Well, there were some gems in there. And Ted, I want you to respond to that too. I love the pre-call concept, setting that expectation and the walkthrough. Can you talk about that? Are those things that you guys utilize, or do you do something a little bit different?
So the expectation, setting the expectations is important. So rather than showing up at the door with the product ready to walk in the door is a bad, even though it might be a small item and it's easy to just carry it right in. It's not the consumer, you don't know what you're walking into, so the consumer needs to be able to describe to you or to the driver what their expectation is. Even if it's a small box, it doesn't matter. They need to tell you, okay, this is what I expect. I've got a dog, you got to deal with that, or I don't want you to go over in this direction, whatever it is. So that initial conversation with the consumer before you have the product is very, very important. And John mentioned running into a problem, and sometimes customers are argumentative. That's not what I ordered, or something that could be a potentially difficult situation. The drivers, training them to keep their cool no matter what the customer says. Ned mentioned it as well. The customer's right. So even if we don't think they're right, they are right. So keeping your cool and the whole yes ma'am, yes sir, I'll make this right somehow, some way, I'll make it right for you is really important.
So with that kind of setting the expectations, Ed, tell me this: how do you manage the safety protocols, health and safety protocols? Because there's a couple different schools of thought there, but how do you train your people to utilize those, exemplify those, and really make sure that the customer understands those are being used?
The safety protocols in today's world, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all learned, and the drivers know that by practicing these safety protocols and communicating it at the pre-call, calling the day before, letting the customer know what our protocols are, asking them if there has been any COVID in their household, or if they've been exposed in any way. That's a comfort level you're also giving the consumer, that we're concerned about healthy and safety. So the drivers know, by them practicing the safety protocols, that keeps them working. That keeps them going, because the one thing that we all saw occur during COVID, we went from white glove to put it into the garage and they'll take it themselves. So we had a lot of shifting where customers wanted the product, but then they did not feel comfortable with anybody coming in their home, but they still wanted us to make the delivery. So really, it's, again, what I think John and Ted, it's having the conversation with our customer. We do have safety protocols, but it doesn't matter what our protocols are as much as what does the customer want us to do. And if they are wanting us to hold off on the delivery until they're more comfortable, well, that's one thing. Or if they want us to handle it in a different format in which we're used to. We're going to work towards whatever that customer wants to effectively make that delivery.
Yeah, I told people we went from white glove to latex glove.
Yeah.
is what delivery went to. Great question has just come in, and we've got the perfect panel for this. And John, I'll start with you because you are you're the third party entity here. How does an independent retailer, this is great what we're talking about here, ensuring that my culture, the way I want them to treat it, how that's translated through through the third party entity. There's a lot of concern, and this is a great question, I think. How do you ensure that? How do I ensure the integrity of what I want if I have my, Mark Schumacher furniture store, but if I'm utilizing somebody else to deliver it, how do I make sure that that's carried through?
No, it's a great question. You could absolutely use a third-party provider. I think, it depends on whether or not that third-party provider is using an employee-based delivery or they're using a non-asset solution. We do both. Process is different when you're using a contract carrier versus an employee. With contractors, you're limited on what you can do to train. You have to follow labor laws since a contractor has to control their own workflow. But you can, I think, build out incentive programs that help achieve the brands that you want. It's important to make sure that you defined what those metrics are, that you track them, and that they actually drive brand, brand performance and brand improvement. Things like on-time window, voice of the customer, damage. Those are all critical components, and you can build an incentive program out for those contract carriers that helps drive that performance. So you recognize and incentivize them for that. But definitely on the employee side, it's significantly different because you can train, you can do role play.
Sure.
But it's absolutely possible to do that.
Ted, do you want to add anything into that as well? Because that's a really great question.
Yeah, as much as you have to interview your own drivers, you have to interview a third party, and you're interviewing the managers, of course, or the owners or whoever of the third party versus the individual drivers. But if they have an attitude of customer service first, if they have an attitude of customer care, the owners, then that's typically trickled down to their drivers. Another thing I'll tell you is the cheapest isn't always the best. You can get the cheapest carrier out there to make your deliveries, but you're going to get what you pay for. So maybe it means you spend just a little bit more on your third-party delivery service and you get a better customer experience, because all of the savings you might have realized with an inexpensive third-party carrier is out the window when you get some negative customer feedback or bad reviews online or what have you.
So you're almost saying that you almost need to interview, like you're doing for this new talent you're getting. You need to interview that third party in a way to see if they can deliver on the promise and reflect your business positively. Ed, do you have any insights on that as well?
Yeah, we actually use the third party. We actually had a hybrid model. We actually controlled our warehouse, and we had a third party contractor running out of our building. And then we went away from our building, and then we went to a third-party contractor, Complete, as Thomasville went through their trials and tribulations. But I will tell you, I think Ted said it right. It's really about interviewing and working with that third-party contractor to make sure they have the culture in their business model that adapts to your culture. And having a great relationship with a third party, the beauty part about having an open dialogue, you'd want that same contractor, whoever the delivery team is, to try to have some continuity where they would actually assign the same driver to that particular client. So we had drivers assigned to our account, even though it wasn't run out of our building. They knew our customer base. They knew the products that we were delivering. So there was a lot of positioning the teams for success. So culture of your third party, making sure you have an open dialogue, and making sure that the open deluxe prep process meets your expectations. And then, like anything else, it's benchmark, it's KPIs, it's watching, and it's measuring.
Okay, I appreciate that from all three of you. That's a terrific question, because I know there's so many of our members that either go direct to a third party or have a hybrid. Like you said, some do their own close in local delivery, and then we'll third party elsewhere. I know that our friends over in Hawaii, CSWO, they do their own delivery on Oahu, but then they've got to do third party. So, everybody's got their own different aspect, but it's your product. It's your name that's going out there. So I totally get that. I want to bring up a couple things to the three of you and get your reactions to it, because knowing we were going to be talking about this, I've talked to a number of our retail members about what they consider to be some of the best practices. And one of them said, and you've touched on this, but I love the fact that there's a retailer that said, we tell our delivery crews to celebrate the sale, to treat that moment like a celebration. This doesn't mean wearing party hats and that kind of stuff, but what it means is that attitude of walking in like going, man, this is a big deal. We're gonna kind of help celebrate that. And I'll just throw that out to whoever wants to jump in. What are your thoughts about that? Because I think that what they're trying to do there is create a mindset for their crew as they arrive. But what are some thoughts about that?
I think that's great. I mean, we have to remember it's a major purchase for that consumer. They may not make that purchase again for another 24 months or longer. And so creating a great experience for that just complements the sale, and you get that, brand loyalty. So I think that's great.
And just to be able to add the, wow, it looks beautiful.
That's exactly right.
Because everybody worries about when they make that purchase, are they buying the right thing? And just somebody that they don't even know, they don't know these people, but somebody reinforcing that, wow, it looks beautiful. That's it. You really.
It's a total. That's kind of there's a part of that when I hear something like that, I go, well, duh, it makes sense. But this is we got to not forget the basics, right? When you send these crews out there, you've got to remember, these basic things. And Ted, I want to throw this one at you, because there was another. I loved this. One of them said their best delivery driver, when he gets to the door, the person opens up the door, and this delivery driver looks and just said, I have been looking forward to this moment all week. And it sounds corny. But I mean, it sounds corny, but the point of the matter is, it's just like, and you can only imagine the smile on the person's face. So when we talk about these soft skills and stuff, there's these two examples I gave you. Also, isn't there a point to say to everybody listening to this thing, be creative. Think about ways to make it, stand out in a different way and make it different. Do you agree with that, Ted? And if so, do you have any of your own thoughts about that?
I do agree, and that specific attitude depends on the driver. If you get a driver who's not naturally that way and is forced, and he's trying to be Mr. Happy, and it's going to come across fake. But there are some people that are naturally like that, and that will work well for them. But try and encourage everybody's, whatever their personality trait is, try and encourage that positivity to come out of their personality trait. Not everybody's the super upbeat, happy personality.
Right.
So don't try and force people to be something they're not. But they can be better or happier than they might otherwise be.
Yeah, but encourage it if it's there. Give them the ability to say, hey, throw a little personality into it. I'll never forget, there was a retiring traffic cop in Florida. Traffic cop, never had a complaint in 35 years in his file, and they followed him, and it's because every time he'd walk up to a car, it's the worst thing in the world when you get pulled over. Not that it's ever happened to me, but I've heard. And he would walk up, and he would just walk up, and he would say, hey, how you doing today? I'm sure this is not the best part of your day. Sorry, but just had to. And he just kind of like disarmed people, and he never had one complaint. And I think there's a lesson there for anybody that deals with customers in that instance. Hey, quick question. This is a good one that just came a little hot off the presses here. So we talked about damage earlier. How do you incentivize your delivery teams from the standpoint of ensuring no damage if it's potentially their fault? How do you incentivize them to really make sure that they handle things carefully and aren't damaged? John, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it starts with measuring performance and having a good baseline, and then recognizing and reward. It doesn't have to be a major financial incentive. It can be something as small as additional compensation for lower damage. All that does is create a better experience. You get the product in the home and it's not coming back. And so there's all these upstream, advantages to do that. But something as simple as just, a bonus on the top of that, or something small in compensation, and then definitely recognizing, top performing teams, I think is important.
Ted, how do you incentivize? This is a great point for people out there. What are some key things you can do?
We send out questionnaires or after action cards to our customers and say, and we don't do it to everyone, but we do it occasionally and say, how was your experience with our team member? And not everybody responds. We understand that, but to the extent that they respond positively, then we incentivize the team members, and the team members all know that there could be a comment card or a response card or an email, depending on the circumstance, going to that end user, and their response can impact that team member in a positive way. Like we do gift cards. Everybody likes gift cards. They can use them for whatever they want. They don't have to be expensive, $25, something small. But when they get a positive comment from a customer, we pass out and we do it in a big way. We do it in a group meeting in front of everybody. Because you have to celebrate the successes. So if anybody who gets celebrated at a group meeting always feels great about it.
Yes,
and what about KPIs from your point of view? What are those things that you put in place for your teams?
So the KPIs, there has to be a mix of efficiency, how many deliveries and how many miles and how many pieces and that kind of thing. And then the customer satisfaction, because you can't do one without the other. You can be super customer satisfied and then make one delivery a day. Well, that's not a good business model.
Not going to cut it.
20 deliveries and you had a bunch of unsatisfied customers. So we monitor both.
And what about you as far as KPIs are concerned?
Yeah, it goes on number of deliveries, number of items, pieces that we deliver. And we measured it in that format. The recognition that Ted was talking about is so critical in front of their audience, in front of their peers, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but yet just to be called out and recognized, it makes the team feel well appreciated and deserving. So we would have a monthly event, and we'd have breakfast in the morning, and at each month we'd have a little breakfast and celebrate the past month, and really show our appreciation.
Okay, that's part of that retention piece we talked about earlier, right, John? I mean, what we're talking about here. I mean, that's critical. Are there any other key retention pieces, John, that you can share that you guys have found successful?
Yeah, I would say just on the metrics real quick, Mark, before I forget, sure. I think on the damage side, we look at it as a number of property damage claims that they have per 1,000 deliveries, just to get a metric. And then we also do that for product damage. And we use that to measure that and incentivize them and reward them for top performers, folks that have no damage. I don't want to underestimate how a property damage can be a very negative experience for consumer. And so we think that's very important as well. In terms of the retention, I mean, I think you have to make it, a destination for delivery teams. You want to make it as easy as possible for them. We talk about, the thoughts on their side, but when they show up to a warehouse, is it organized? Is it ready for them to work? You don't want to have a delivery team come in and they're having to wait to be loaded if they're not loading it out, or if they are loaded out, they're waiting on product to be pulled to inspect. And so anything you can do to set them up for success and help retain them, I think is important. But that recognition goes a long way. That's as much more than compensation. People want to be recognized.
I mean, I know Ted a second ago talked about the fact of how the drivers are involved in the loading of the truck as well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the loading. But your point is that if they're not having a good experience on the warehouse side of the transaction, again, if we're talking about wanting them to come to that front door with a fresh, positive approach, it starts with what that first hour and a half of your day looked like, right? As far as back in the warehouse. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want them to have to be delayed and then feel like they're in a rush. You want them to be prepared and to be able to walk to that door and knock on the door, not thinking about they're in trouble on their next 3 deliveries that they have. So that setting up for success is important to take that stress away.
Ted, one more question here I wanted to ask, and I'll throw it to you. So you have a crew that's had a rough delivery. Are there certain techniques, and this is a question that came through, are there certain techniques that you suggest that they be trained in the field on how to let that go and get on to the next one? Because if you have carryover, then you're already at a detrimental here, because you're going to have somebody with a poor attitude. What can you do to help these crews sort of digest what might have been not the greatest experience, knowing they've got 7 more deliveries to do?
Sure. And you're 100% right, because it'll carry over. We all deal with that in our own lives. You have a bad meeting with someone and it just carries on for the rest of the day. But you can't allow that when you're a driver, because they don't know what just happened. They don't know what happened a half hour ago at the previous delivery, nor do they care, nor should they care. So what we do is we encourage our drivers to, after they do actually every time, they call back to the warehouse and they talk into either the dispatcher or the manager, or depending on the circumstances. And we encourage them to say, tell us if something didn't go well. Let's talk about it. We're not going to talk about it for an hour, but let's talk about it and kind of decompress a little bit of what happened. And the manager's job or the dispatcher's job, depending on the circumstance or who they're talking to, will try and explain to them what maybe they could have done differently, or maybe it wasn't their fault at all. Maybe it was the customer just had unrealistic expectations. But to try and get them past the point that they're going to carry it with them throughout the rest of their day.
So you're encouraging those managers then to listen, and then to kind of get that team right for that next delivery.
They're a little bit of a counselor in that way, and they have to be, because if your employee isn't in the right mindset before they walk into the next house, it's going to show.
And Ed, I would assume, I saw you nodding, I would assume that you don't want that information at the end of the day. You'd want to have that. You want to have that as you go. I mean, what do you think about what Ted just said?
Well, that's the only way. You got to talk the driver off the cliff, because what you don't want is, you don't want him going to his next stop harboring or coming across. He's not going to be so jovial when he's knocking on that door. He's got to decompress. The only way to do it is put him in touch with someone that talks him off and that calms him down. And that's the role of managers. That's what the manager is to do. Talks him down and gets him right for the next delivery. And then they celebrate that next perfect delivery.
John, I'll give you the last word on that. What are your thoughts also about how they manage that through the day?
No, I completely agree. Their direct manager is critical in that process, and then helping them out. And if you don't have that, they're definitely going to be challenged to reset and go on to the next delivery.
Another great takeaway, as we're wrapping up our hour here for people that are listening, because you're just basically saying you just can't leave them out there to deal with whatever and come back at the end of the day. You got to manage it through the day. So that's a terrific takeaway. We've had a lot of great takeaways during today's discussion. And I want to put these up here so that we can just kind of review a lot of the highlights of what it is that we heard here today. And first, it started out with, and we're going to pop these up here in just a second, but here we go. Corey, you need to go full screen on that. Oh, he's yeah, there we go. I'm calling Corey out. He does a phenomenal job behind the scenes to make this all look good. I just stand here and talk. So the key takeaways: finding great hires begins with setting expectations for your hiring team, and be cautious about settling, even in a time when we have such a difficult time finding people. Key attributes for a great hire, including great interpersonal skills, an upbeat attitude, and a positive first impression, things that Ted talked about. You can learn in that interview process. Approach the interview like you are the customer. Retention is critical. John talked about this. Show opportunity by creating a career path, providing training, and showing appreciation. Pair newly hired team members with cultural leaders to improve their experience. You want to just not give them a book, here's what you need to do, but you need to have somebody that can really guide them through the process. We have a few more here. Invest in a training program that continuously practices the skills needed to overcome the real world challenges facing your teams. Super important and consistent according to this panel. Train on areas like personal appearance, greeting the customer, determining customer expectations, the in-home experience, confirming the customer is satisfied, how to handle common issues, and managing the customer, and much, much more. You're putting your teams through a lot when you send them out to the customer's house, believe me. Empower your team to show customers they are there to solve their issue now and communicate any needed resolution timeline. And in fact, we talked about the ability to, in real time, to communicate back at the store, back at the warehouse to be able to solve things right there. Let's see here. Do we have any other takeaways? Yes. Conduct pre-delivery calls with customers to set expectations. Have a manager available to de-escalate situations. Managers need to be there to listen and act as a counselor to the driver teams. Work with third-party carriers to set expectations and build an incentive program. While interviewing companies, look for cultural attributes that trickle down to staff. Love that. And tracked KPIs should include customer satisfaction, number of deliveries, number of items, and damage. And I love this. Celebrate and recognize success with your teams at every opportunity. But we didn't do our work today. We had no takeaways. I don't understand that. This has been hugely valuable. And I want to just, of course, thank our guests here today. We had Ed Massoud from Home Furnishings of New Jersey. Ed, I appreciate you being here. John Vargo, Vice President with JB Hunt, we thank you. And Ted Stoker, who's VP of Ops for Kelly's Gift Shop Suppliers. And I want to point out, by the way, that what you're watching right now is just one of the small ways that you can find the power of membership in the HFA, because we create a community like this, but we do much more with resources and education and advocacy. So myhfa.org/join is your quickest way to connect. So again, I want to thank everybody. Appreciate all of you joining us, and we of course will have another webinar coming up to help you grow your business. I'm Mark Schumacher. On behalf of all of us here at HFA, we wish you good health and, most importantly, great business. See you next time.
Thank you.